Good morning and thank you. My question is, based on the distributed resources that you said and the resilience, whether a series of mini hydro dams would you recommend that, since based on our water resources? I know we spoke about wind and solar, but based on our water resources, whether a series of hydro dams would you recommend that?
Okay, I think I heard the question whether I would recommend mini hydro.
Yes,
because of the water resource.
Yes.
What I would say on that is because a lot of those technologies have to do with other construction consideration. For example, if you're going to go into a river, if you live next to a river, for example, right, for residential purposes, and you can, relatively easily access a micro hydro installation and a resource, then yes, for sure. But then if you have to consider the construction of dams and so forth, then you have to do the math to see whether it makes sense in terms of the cost of energy. I know that, for example, in Dominica, on the residential front, if you're paying anywhere above $400 EC a month, and you do not have solar, that is kind of like the sweet spot. You are sort of wasting money. You're throwing the money away. Because we've done work in Dominica to know that the payback period for solar, anything more than $400, you're paying back under five years. So it makes sense to go into solar. In terms of micro hydro and mini hydro, that is something that would have to be looked at on an individual basis. I know for some municipalities and villages, it probably makes sense if you consider the cost of transmission lines and the cost of maintaining those lines, and especially after a large weather event like we saw for Maria, it may make more sense to actually do micro and mini hydro in some of those localities. But Dominica is a tricky place, our topography is tricky. So I think our river resource is precious as well, so it's something that we have to take into consideration. But the short answer to that would be yes. I would certainly explore micro and mini hydro as an energy resource for Dominica.
Right, go ahead, Isaac.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. My question is that it is something that is very current right now. There has been a lot of criticism regarding the approach that the government took to resolve our energy issues as far as renewables are concerned. In that, they are going geothermal. The cost implication, we know, it has been considerable. Many have been arguing that it would have been better had the government went with going a combination of hydro and solar. There would have been maybe lower cost energy in terms of transfer of technology and training of people, etc., to maintain the system and all of that. From a professional point of view, what is your opinion as to whether there was sufficient cost-benefit analysis to make a decision, or whether the decision taken, you can, from your point of view as a professional looking at it outside, the amount that has been spent so far, was it the preferred decision to take?
The question I heard was considering the direction that the current regime took in developing geothermal as opposed to going after solar, and whether that was the right decision.
Correct. Yes, from a cost-benefit analysis. From a cost-benefit analysis.
From a cost-benefit analysis. This one is a tricky question on many levels. I would say the biggest one is when you consider the return on investment. If you're looking at a project like geothermal, I don't think we can easily say that let's see what the return on investment is, right? If we're looking at an international airport, for example, what is the return on investment on an international airport? I am someone who loves technology. I think I would support the development and the exploration of geothermal, not necessarily for short-term returns, but something that can really place and position Dominica to continue to explore that resource, especially as we talk about clean transportation and really looking at other fringe benefits, if you will, that can come from geothermal. However, with that said, we see that the current technology of solar, for example, is a lower hanging fruit and can very easily be accessed. So if I was to make that decision today, I would say that I would go after the expansion of solar, especially rooftop solar and residential solar, and certainly some of the commercial establishments, maybe in conjunction or in parallel with the development of geothermal. Now, let me just say that if right now we are saying that about 15 megawatts or 15 units of generation is coming from diesel, and to make the math simple, we're saying about half of that is going to come from geothermal, and we are looking at expanding Dominica's economy into the future. We still are not. We don't have enough capacity as it relates to going after zero emission. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done if we are going after zero emission. Zero emission meaning that we want to remove diesel from our generation pool. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and I think there is still room for the expansion of hydro. I think there is still a lot of room for harnessing the solar resource that is so abundant in Dominica. And I think there is still room to continue to explore and expand on geothermal. I don't think that we should put our hands over our ears and say that we're going just one direction. We've seen around the world that countries are going after all of the above. So I don't think Dominica we should shy away from exploring all of the above. And I think everything that is available to us, we have a very young, vibrant, and very smart population. My solar students in Grandfond are very curious to see the development of solar in their communities. So we have, and they live right next to Trafalgar and Loda, right up the hill, right? So the expansion of hydro. So I think Dominica is well suited to continue to explore all of the above, and that is where I think I will focus. Continue to explore our resources.
All right, thank you. Chef Maria, go ahead.
Let me just put in a correction. I'm not Spanish and Italian, I'm Romeo, married.
All right, good.
My question that I have is first I'm going to also direct to Dr. Thompson. Now, but you might be able to be some sort of assistance because we're talking about energy reduction of all. Well, my question is that I'm going to uncover a can of worms. My question is that, well, first of all, let me say, a couple years ago, Douglas, the Prime Minister of the Roses, kept us as a request and we talked about energy. And I asked him that if Bird Island had belonged to Dominica, he said yes, Bird Island is supposed to belong to Dominica, but when Patrick John declared Dominica for independence, then Bird Island was not declared. Now, the last article I read about Bird Island is that it belongs to Dominica, but our Prime Minister in 2006 signed a temporary, I don't know what it means, a temporary agreement with Venezuela to own Dominica. My question is this: as much as we're going to be about 20% of this, that 20% is going to cost us money. Is there any dialogue or any idea or any thought of open dialogue with Venezuela, how we should be able to get some of the resources or the profits from the fuel taken from Dominica, from Venezuela? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Doc, I'm not sure that question was directed to me.
Okay, I'm gonna try to respond. Yes, sure. The issue of Bird Island is a very interesting one, and it's something that we have talked about in the past. Now, as you rightly indicated, a few years ago, but probably around that same time, the OECS countries, they were prepared to go to court on behalf of Dominica, but that action was stopped by our government. So something happened between our government and the Venezuelan government that until we get into government, we don't know exactly what it was. Because in true fashion, they never told the Dominican public what agreement they reached with Venezuela. So that is an issue. Again, I believe the way an issue like that has to resolve that it must go through the International Court of Arbitration. But we can't do anything now except wait until when this government changes and then we can try to do it. Yeah, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I must say, I must stand there, and Mr. Green said earlier, Dexter is from his village, but Dexter and I had the privilege to go to grammar school together. Dexter, good day, bro. And I must add to that, I listened to all the different presenters from yesterday, today, thus far, and these are all sons and ladies. Well, most of the presenters here are men so far, and I must say these are our people. We have what it takes. We have what it takes. I listened to Dexter and his passion for what he, his intelligence, his articulation. He doesn't cause the problem, my brother, but you have a lot of solutions for it. Same thing like our brother earlier from Paybush. He has a lot of solutions. We, among us, whether locally resident or internationally, we have a lot of solutions for whatever the issues was created, not by us, but we have a lot of solutions within our own self. We have a lot of resources and intelligence to get it done. Again, I was speaking to a few people earlier. The time is now. The time is now. The time is now for us to do something about it. Again, hats off to Dr. Thompson Fontaine and the other teams involved, all the other position members involved, and to overall, to we as a people who've made time from our busy schedule. We have things to do. But for the past 2 days, we have been here addressing the issues at hand. So I wanted to just take the opportunity. I'm not a PRO, but I just want to take the opportunity to thank everyone thus far for being here. And those of us who are here on time. I think time is something that we need to work on. We need to show more respect for ourselves and each other with time. And all of us can be responsible for that. Right? We need to start more on time and be on time. Right? So, but I think overall, I just want to again salute you, Dexter. And what you presented here, and I know quite a bit about you, and again to our brother here from Paybush that's contributed thus far. Again, I just want to say we have what it takes to fix where we are as Dominicans. Thank you.
That's a very great presentation. I just want to pick up on something you said. I like the idea of the parallel approach. So pursue geothermal, at the same time explore the potential for solar. As far as we know, over $1 million has been spent on the geothermal project. Some people say over 100 million. Some persons say that's over 200 million. Whatever the true figures are, the numbers are very large. I have a question for you. Based on your experience, what recommendations would you make in terms of pursuing the parallel approach? And the question is, what would you recommend as an approach to the financial constraints? Loans are burdensome, for example. So suppose we were to pursue the parallel approach, what recommendations would you make in terms of financing that, overcoming the financial constraints?
Dr. Fontaine, I'm not sure if this question was directed at me. I heard that what recommendation would I make as it relates to the financial constraints with the current move to continue to explore and develop the geothermal resource.
Yes, that's about it, yeah.
I think I would speak from a engineering point of view. I cannot speak much from the financial side. I am not sure what financial packages and what financial structure was considered in developing the geothermal resource. I am probably in a small minority that supports and continue to support the development of geothermal in Dominica. I think that we can probably disagree on how the project is probably managed and how the project is positioned and structured, and we probably can disagree on whether we should have gone after geothermal and not solar. I would say that I think that it continues to be a missed opportunity for us to not develop our solar resource. We've heard several folks say that solar is not that important, but most of them have solar on their homes. So I have my family has solar on their homes, and it's quite it's an important resource to have when utility power goes down and you have stuff in your refrigerator, or in the middle of the night you get up and something happens to the utility and you need to go to the bathroom, you need to turn the lights on. So I'm not of the view that we should only seek to develop one resource and not the other. That question is probably more for Dr. Fontaine. When it comes to how do we protect, or it seems that we need to protect the existence of the utility in Dominica. If we say everybody goes solar, we utilize all the rooftop spaces available in Dominica and we incentivize folks to go into solar, then what happens to our utility? Does the utility fail? Do we need the utility to continue to exist? I come from the utility. I was trained and raised in the utility industry. I think it's a very important piece of our infrastructure, and we should never lose the existence of a utility. I know a lot of folks don't like the utility company, but from my point of view, I think it's an important thing to have and to exist. So some of the I'm saying all of this to say that maybe some calculations are made in the background as to whether we want to see the utility go bankrupt or whether we want to see the utility still exist. And that's a question that we have to answer as stakeholders and as a community, and to discuss again, bringing the IRC, the Independent Regulatory Commission, into discussion as to what kind of utility do we want to see in Dominica in 2024 and beyond, knowing what we know about solar, knowing what we know about geothermal, knowing what we know about resilience. I think that's a question that we need to continue to have, but I would just reiterate my view that I think every possible resource is important.
And that will be it, so I recognize you first, then Ito, then these two gentlemen here will take them. But let me just take the opportunity to say this, based on what you just said. Oh, and we must take some online questions. In fact, let's go to that first and then we'll come back in because they have been with us and there are some very important questions. But just I want to say this quickly, because in terms of new technology, the structures of the economies will have to change over time, and we cannot always resist that change. So we have to get into some point a serious discussion on what needs to be done to facilitate new efforts, new technology, and so on. And around the world, that is being faced head-on with different kinds of technology, smart meters, and encouraging people to grow energy from home or produce energy from home and so on. But one of the issues we have is how do we, although the cost of solar is maybe comparable, as you said, to fossil fuel generated energy, part of the problem is there's still a high upfront cost. And from a financial side, we also need to consider how we encourage individuals to make that upfront cost. But in the long run, it could be very much better for them. But all of these things we have to think through and work through as we consider how best to govern. So let's take the online questions first, and then we'll go to a final round of questions. Go ahead. Okay, he's looking for them in the meantime. So let's take the gentleman here, and then Ito, and then as soon as the online is ready, we'll come to them.
I'd like to make a few comments on the question of solar energy in particular. Solar energy needs flat land, more or less. We do not have the luxury of flat land in Dominica. At least what we have is most well enough. Remember, the government was looking for a place to build a new hospital. They had to come back to the sales point because there were no other suitable lands close to Roseau, let's put it that way. So we have a problem of flat land in Dominica. Solar needs flat land and probably marginal lands, semi-arid or whatever. So solar on an industrial scale is not possible in Dominica. On the question of resilience, the most resilient form of energy production is the good old diesel. It can be located in a fortified building, as there is a properly more or less. A few machines concentrated in a fortified building. Transmission can go down, whatever, but that generating plant is very resilient. Diesel is the most resilient form of energy that we've got. Talking about diesel, our friends in Guyana have discovered oil and are exploring oil reserves. Guyana is part of a single market and economy. So we in Dominica can say we have oil reserves as part of a single market and economy. They want to build from their oil resources oil refinery. That is where the governments of the Caribbean can come together in the building and have shares in the building of that oil refinery in Guyana. Dominica put in a 40 million US, St. Lucia, Grenada. This is what the single market and economy is about.
Thank you very much.
And so let me one of the on the question of hydro plants, we do not need many plants in Dominica. But one thing we need, and that can contribute to hydroelectricity, water reservoirs. We are boasting about our water resources and our water resources. But we have to be able to withstand 6 months of drought in Dominica. We do not consider that the thing that rivers will be always flowing at the rate we are. Climate change, we know, we have heard about effects of climate change. We have to expect 6 months of drought in Dominica. That means, and they already mentioned it in our gospel, they need to build a reservoir or two in Dominica. And quickly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for speaking. Okay, let's have Bernardito.
Thank you. There's so much to be said on this, but time is limited. I'll say a few brief comments. One, in terms of the original question you had on the hydrogen possibilities, Dominic, and that is a big care about of mine and something I'm very interested in as well. There are two reasons for this. Hydrogen is released simply by hydrolysis, right? You take electricity, you split water, hydrogen is released. That's a very simplified explanation, but it's essentially true. but you do need to have very clean sources of water, which is something Dominica has in abundance. So we're actually very blessed if we can get this energy situation in place, that we could have abundant energy and one of the best sources of water for hydrogen production in the world. It's been analyzed and Dominica's water is one of the best. And so we have the ingredients in place to definitely embark upon a serious hydrogen economy in Dominica, and that's a serious part of my consideration as well. But not only hydrogen economy, we can also do synthetic fuels, which is another use of energy to convert organic material into synthetic fuels that are equivalent to gasoline and diesel and all of those things. You convert those into those and you don't even have to do a hydrogen cell. You just put it into your vehicle like you do now. So there are lots of possibilities when you have cheap energy. You can do things like data storage and data processing, data mining, and a bunch of things. So absolutely we must pursue every source of energy to make energy a serious economic sector in our country. So we must pursue geothermal. There should be no question in our mind that we pursue geothermal. The issue with geothermal is that it's not being pursued correctly. The reason the cost of energy will not go down with geothermal comes online is those guys have taken exorbitant loans at extremely high interest rates from private investors. That has to be paid back with profit on top of that. So the rates that they will charge for the energy from geothermal are going to be even higher. It's predicted to be even higher than they have today. It is not a matter of a technical challenge or the issue of geothermal as a technology. It's the issue of the finance structure and the political structure that is driving that development. So that's on that. As far as our energy resources go, we need to have a very comprehensive plan. It's not a Viking thing where we build a solar plant there, we do a little water thing there. No, we need to have a very comprehensive development plan for the energy sector in Dominica. Because what we need is a distributed grid of renewable resources, micro, hydro, solar, geothermal, wind energy, wave energy, mechanical action energy under the sea. It's not an issue of energy generation. We're full of energy. It's an issue of energy capture. And with a comprehensive plan that can be done, the technology exists. And you made a comment earlier that the cost will not come down. I have to disagree. These are technology-driven things, and all technology costs come down over time. If you look at computers, if you look at the cost of PV cells, photovoltaic cells, they are now cost competitive with diesel generation. And that curve will only decrease as because it's human knowledge. Human knowledge finds ways to make things more efficient and cheaper over time, and that trend will continue. So we can do it. The matter is, do we have comprehensive plans in place that understand how to implement a distributed grid? Well, and I have to be specific with my friend, the worst thing we could possibly do is set up a big diesel plant in one location. Because that's once that goes down, the entire grid is down. So you want distributed sources of small grids, local grids that are interconnected to have resilience. That's the things that we have to do, and that's the approach that we have to take. Unfortunately, we don't have the leadership who cares about, or frankly understands deeply enough what is to be done in a comprehensive manner.
Thank you. We'll get to other questions. But there's a lot to be discussed in this area. But just to say one thing, I remember a couple years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when the company is now sold to government, but the Canadian company that owned it, they owned the Barbados Light and Power, and they also owned the Dominica company. And I happened to be having a flight with him. So while I agree 100%, and Dexter, that's agreeing with you in some sense, but while I agree 100%, the exorbitant cost for geothermal is a huge problem, of course. But from way back then, he said to me, they expressed interest in the geothermal plant in terms of doing one. And he said to me clearly, it's because they expect the cost to fall. They didn't expect that with a small plant. So the only way you're going to find the costs falling using the current technology then with geothermal is if you produce that scale. So if you're talking about producing enough to sell to the neighboring islands and so on. But if a small plant, as they do in Dexter, would have to agree with you that you don't expect a decrease. But there are other benefits. There's benefits of sustainability, there's benefits of resilience and so on. All right? But technically, it's possible. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. I've always had that concern about this deal that, this government has struck with that American company. Because I figure if you build in a geothermal plant, and you have some persons, I think, from the United States that are supposed to be managing it on a 25-year contract. After 25 years, hopefully they will return it to us. But I imagine within 3 to 4 years, they would have recouped whatever they invested. And all the rest is gravy. And by the time that 25 years comes around, the equipment would probably be maybe even obsolete, and you would have to get all new equipment. So at the end of the exercise, I look at it as a loss. Every way you look at it as a loss. I believe Dominica should be managing that geothermal distribution plant, and whatever it costs, we should get out of that contract with the American company. We have to provide our own. We have enough expertise in Dominicans all over in the diaspora who can assist us, in going forward. You remember all those wonderful things that Petrocaribe was supposed to have done? Did we see any of it? Nothing. Electricity has gone up. Everything has gone up. So I believe that in other words, why are we building a 10 megawatts geothermal facility when our daily consumption here is about 18 to 20 megawatts daily? So we're building something right now that is not even enough. So in other words, we're not making any allowance for the future. If you genuinely want to build a hydro a plant, you should really build something about a 40 or maybe 50 watt plant. But 50 watt, 50 megawatts plant, but coming up with a little 10 megawatt plant, which is just about half of our daily consumption, you're not ready yet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Betsy, you want to respond to any of the last three comments we've had? Go ahead.
I had a little bit of difficulty in hearing some of the audio, so if you'd allow me, and please just relay some of the questions. But one thing I would comment on is one of the speakers said that diesel is the most renewable or sustainable, whatever word that was used. Resilient, the source of energy. And while I will say that we've been using diesel and fossil fuel for as long as electricity has been around, maybe since we moved from steam, which incidentally we're going back to with geothermal, it's really using a steam generator to produce electricity. We must also be cognizant of the fact that we don't have diesel in Dominica, and the disruption that happens around the world, we cannot say that these things will not impact us. So if you want to say that diesel is the most resilient source of energy, I cannot disagree with you. That's an opinion. However, if we are talking about policy and moving Dominica in the right direction, and we're saying that something happened around the world and we have a 3-month to 6-month interruption in bringing diesel into Dominica, then what? So I do not subscribe to the fact that we should continue to power, and I'm not sure that's what the gentleman was saying. We should continue to use diesel exclusively and to look at diesel as our main source of energy. I think we would be missing the point. The second thing I would comment on is the fact that solar needs flat land to be a main source of energy. One of the things that we've seen is that we actually have to tilt the solar panels to a certain degree facing south in our part of the world. So it's not entirely true that we need exclusively flat land to develop solar. And the other thing too is that we've seen around the world that communities come together and utilize the existing roof spaces. So if you look at a 2,000 square foot house or 1,500 square foot house, and you sort of bring all of those together, it's quite a bit of surface space to develop solar. So I'm not of the view that we need to cover half of a mountain or half of a field with solar panels to generate electricity. I don't think that's necessarily true. And we've seen around the world that they put some of those panels on water surfaces. So we have options. I think we can look at different options. There's no one size fit all for all of these things, and we can be creative. We have smart people who have looked at those things and who've worked around the world with some of these technologies. So I think there's room for development and improvement on that. This is the one that I heard most of the audio. If you could please relay an important question that I have missed.
The last one that was said, the last question, can you hear me? He was making a comment concerning the scale that we chose to do 5,000 megawatt, 10,000 megawatt generator when our current capacity is 28, or I think from your figures, 18 from your figures, half of it. Shouldn't we be doing much better than that? Shouldn't we have planned for much higher than that? That was basically his comment. 40 megawatts maybe even, that's what he was saying. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, okay, so good point. Ideally, I think when Dominica first embarked on developing geothermal, the original intention was to develop our resource and possibly export power to Guadeloupe and Martinique. And I have seen stuff written about exporting power as Puerto Rico. I still believe that's possible. We continue to develop our resource and explore our resource. So I get the sense that the people who embarked on this initiative to develop our geothermal resource wanted probably to do a pilot project first to see how it would go. And we've seen the struggles of developing a 10 megawatt plant. Like I said, I was part of the folks who presented to the Pierre Charles government. That's over 20 years ago. We were all young guys at the time, and now we see all of us are starting to get great. So these things take time if they're not set up properly, if they're not managed properly. And the purpose of me presenting here today is to have that discussion to say that we've seen where we've done certain things right, and we've also seen where we've done certain things wrong. And moving Dominica forward in the right direction, we understand that some of those projects require folks who understand what's going on to manage those projects. And we need to get people in those positions who understand what's going on. And we need to continue to manage our resources in the right way, because that's critical for our development.
All right, thank you, Dexter. Ito's point was just to add to the discuss, adding some more and suggesting that there is a mix of technologies that are maturing that we can tap into. So it's just adding to what you're saying or just extending it. So I think it's quite in line with what you were talking about. Okay? All right. Yes. So thank you very much, Dexter. We really appreciate it. Oh, sorry. Last two questions online. If we are ready for that now. Go ahead.
All right, we have two questions, well, more than two, but in the interest of time, I'll just ask two. One person is saying here, this supersedes my previous post. I guess that's something she's referring to. Given the tendency for the projected increases in the severe weather patterns to include hurricanes and floods, and the fact that most transmission and distribution networks are not fully insured, the question really is to you. What recommendations or suggestions would you propose for hardening the transmission and distribution network in Dominica? So that is one question from someone listening and watching here. And another one in terms of a comment rather than a question. Let me see where let's pull that up. Yeah, Alvin Thomas says here, while I understand Dexter's position on geothermal, like he said, if solar is a low-lying fruit and the capital investment is less, it seems to me that solar and hydro energy would be better a route to take from a financial point and given the country's limited financial resources. So that is one point, and also the question that I would like your comments on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. The first question was what recommendations would I give in terms of hardening the transmission and distribution network as it relates to the increase in weather and severe weather events? I think I heard that question correctly.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so I spoke briefly about looking at distributed energy resources, and what that means again is to decentralize, having all our generation in one area, which we mentioned was in the Roseau Valley, General Fonkole area, and then Portsmouth. We've seen around the world that the decentralizing of those resources and putting generation in multiple areas where we have larger population centers. So, for example, in the southeast and the northeast and the west, and keeping also the generation sources in Fonkole and Trafalgar and Portsmouth. I think that is an area that is quite suitable. That technology is quite suitable for Dominica. We understand how to introduce sectionalizing switches. We understand the technology that is required in terms of grid forming inverters to use inverter-based resources as a technology to decentralize the grid. So these technologies, again, these are mature technologies. We can implement them. We should not, in my view, ever have to wait 8 months for places in the rural communities of Dominica to have electricity. When we talk about equity and inclusion, I cannot see a situation where Roseau, for example, or Portsmouth would not have electricity for 8 months. So we have to be honest in how we discuss our development and how we approach our development, because every Dominican life is important. The second question, as it relates to solar, can you just? I think I heard the fact that we probably should be looking at solar and hydro as a source of power more than geothermal resource. Is that what I heard from the second question?
Basically, the caller was just differing the view on a small extent to suggest that, seeing that you alluded to the fact that solar is more or less as a low-lying fruit and it can be pursued, much quicker. From a financial standpoint, based on our country's scarce resources, the caller was saying or suggesting that wouldn't be the solar route be a much more profitable route to take than the geothermal we're now pursuing.
Yeah, thank you for that. What I would say is whether we should have or we should continue to develop solar and not necessarily have our foot on the pedal with geothermal. Again, I use the example of the solar eclipse. If you have most of your energy coming from solar, let's say, or half of your energy coming from solar, and then you have a situation where you have a solar eclipse, you're going to be losing quite a bit of load. And the consideration in that field or that technology is to balance that out. And that's why the utility company has placed a cap on how much solar is allowed to be injected into our national grid, because there are some constraints as the technology stands today. Again, I made a point earlier in my presentation that we now have the technology of grid forming inverters where we can use battery energy storage and then convert electricity using the new technology and inject that into the grid. And it's less of a concern as it was a few years ago. So these are some of the things that has to be taken into consideration. I did make mention as well as whether, again, assuming that the people who are making policy are concerned of whether, giving everybody the ability to self-generate, what are the implications for our national utility? Would that see the utility going out of service? Would that see the utility being bankrupt? So maybe those are some consideration that goes into making the decision. Again, I would say that as it stands today, the technology does exist to have a higher injection of solar energy into the grid. The cost of generating solar, even from a residential point of view, has significantly decreased, and to the point now where it's probably cheaper or even on par with generating electricity from diesel. So these are some of the things that we need to continue to discuss, and I think it is a valid thing to bring to our policymakers and the Independent Regulatory Commission as to why some of those decisions are made and whether some of those decisions are made in our best interest.
Oh, one last question.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Newton, one last question split in two, because I suspect as the conversation wears on, the comments from the online people gets more interesting. Mava Telemap is asking here, how can the transition to renewable energy create jobs and stimulate economic growth in our struggling economy? That is one aspect of it. Also, what are the potential cost savings for consumers and businesses if we switch to renewable energy sources?
So thank you for your question. As far as what are some of the, let me make sure that I have this question right. What are some of the, how do we create jobs and how do we create opportunities for folks as we transition into renewable energy? The affordability, and I am careful not to say that the reduction in the cost of energy, because what we have seen is that all of us are consuming more power, right? Before, everybody had a phone. Okay. Everybody had a phone in their home, let's say. Now we each have a phone in our pocket. And not only do we have phones, we have laptops, we have tablets. Every child has a tablet and a phone, and we have screens in all our rooms. And we are continuing to increase the consumption of electricity. Therefore, the price may not necessarily increase, but we need more electricity. So how does that transition to the creation of jobs? If we make electricity more affordable to, say, less companies that are able to manufacture in Dominica from more affordable and more available geothermal and more affordable and more available solar and more affordable and more available hydro, then of course Dominica will be more attractive to industry and commerce. One of the trends that I will just mention again that we've seen is that more people are going to cloud computing. What does that mean? You have 5,000 photographs in your phone, and your phone is too small to be able to store all of those photographs. So the Googles and the Apples of the world, they take your photo and they put it in the cloud. But where is the cloud? The cloud is some data center somewhere that is being used to store your photographs and your files. And we have seen that the cost of electricity and the cost of running those data centers are now becoming a huge consumer of electricity. Dominica is not isolated from that. We will continue to use more electricity, and therefore we will be requiring more energy. So can data centers be located in Dominica where we have more affordable and more available electricity? That's a possibility. And so I think when you talk about hotels and tourism and cruise and stay-over visitors and working from home, when you have a country that has a good, solid electrical utility and a good, solid electrical network, it becomes attractive to industry and to commerce. I have to apologize. The second question, can you just repeat that one more time?
Okay, the second leg was what are the potential cost saving for consumers and businesses if we switch to renewable energy? Savings. What are some of those that can be realized?
I would say in terms of the savings, there is and I'm going to use cost in terms of air quotes, there is a cost to losing power, right? If you are a resident and you're losing power, you're not able to continue your work or your life as is. There is a cost. So if we have a steady supply of renewable energy, whereas you may not see a decrease in your electric bill necessarily, the fact that you have to pay to install, let's say, rooftop solar in your homes, there is a cost. But the net benefit is that, one, you always have electricity, you're not losing electricity, and the fact that you own your system over time, you will not necessarily see an increase in the cost of your energy. Whereas you might not see a decrease in your cost, you will not see an increase in the cost of energy. If we, for example, were to say hypothetically, we are going to continue to power our homes and our businesses from diesel, and we see the external shocks from wars and the interruption of supplies, then certainly we can expect the cost of energy to increase. If we go into renewables, the fact that we can generate our own power locally in Dominica, I do not necessarily see the cost of energy increasing. So my answer really is that the cost savings would be in the avoidance of increasing the cost of as they transition into renewable energy sources. I hope that answered your question.
Well, just to give one example of that quickly, last week it was raining, and I lost power. So I couldn't do computer work because I was online doing some work. I said, well, fine, I could have always switched to doing some woodwork. Those of you who know me well enough, I like to do woodwork. But I couldn't do that because I had no backup power. And I said, fine, I could cut my lawn. And I couldn't do that because it was raining. So I could see. But that's the whole day gone. I just had to sit down and wait. A whole day gone. That's. If I had backup power, I would not have lost that day. Does that help to answer? All right, next year, thank you so very much. I'm sure there's more we can say and discuss.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. I must just say that the views that I expressed today and the opinions that I expressed were solely mine. It does not reflect the views of the Department of Energy. And I am very happy to follow up questions. If you may have any follow-up questions, just please reach out to me, dxtnewton@gmail, or you can send me a note on WhatsApp. I'll be glad to continue the conversation.
Thank you. Certainly, you can send us your conversation. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. We could go into the plenary session, or what we have lunch. If lunch is ready, we could do that, or we could take half an hour to discuss some of yesterday's events. Do we know whether or not lunch is time? 1:30. So we have some time.
Let's go 2 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so let's do 20 minutes of
Unfortunately, on behalf of
what I will do,
we
because
are about
all
to
those
say
who were
goodbye.
not here
We
yesterday,
trust
let me
that
see
you had an informative
Okay, so the
listening.
majority of
We
us were
trust
here
that
yesterday.
you enjoyed the presentations, and we'll not be back. There is supposed to be one more presentation.
So because of the
on
way the
sports,
time went
entertainment, and
yesterday, we
culture,
did not have
music
the opportunity to, although we entertained
So we'll
a few
not be there
questions,
for that.
and the presenters
Just
that
want
were
to say
here, other
goodbye
than
and
Errol,
thank you all for joining.
we did not get the opportunity to go into the breakout sessions, but to have
is
some
live.
more
So you
discussions
can
together,
follow with
although we
him.
did have some questions. So we want
Thanks again for joining everyone,
to begin
and
to do that. Now, I don't want to take much time doing that, but what happened yesterday was that we started with Dr. Fontaine, who gave us the background, the baseline scenario, so to speak, the fact that the growth as of our country, we were doing good some time ago, growth as high as 7%, and that came down, and basically, we are already doing about, there was a period when we were doing about 1% or less. And sometimes we go up a little bit to 2%, but basically we have ended up at the bottom of the table with all other OECS countries surpassing us in growth and also in GDP per capita in many cases. So we started with that foundation, and then we moved into agriculture, where we had some tremendous contributions from Errol and from Dr. David. One of the main themes from Errol is that we can find markets. The major problem is there's a lack of institutional structure for organizing commercial agriculture. In the same way that DBMC was able to demonstrate that with proper organization, the industry could do well, could be supported well. The only error from what he said with DBMC was that we had a good model and we applied it only to bananas. If we had applied it to the other crops, possibly we could have still been going. But he was lamenting that is the main issue. It's not so much that we cannot find markets, because the opportunities we look for, but we need the right structures, and these are lacking. Then